Round 2.
Welcome back to my challenge, where I see just how difficult Ultra Kill really is without using any guns at all. First of all, I'm going to preface this by saying you should probably go watch the Act 1 video first, since it wouldn't really make sense to watch this one first. But if you don't want to do all that, here's a brief reminder of the rules of the challenge. First of all, obviously I can't use any guns. That being said though, I'm able to use anything else at my disposal to damage enemies. This includes punching with the feedbacker and the knuckle blaster, ground slamming, knuckle blaster shockwave, and enemy self-damage through stuff like Cerberus apple explosions. Second of all, the entire challenge is being done on violent difficulty, and I'm not able to change it under any circumstances. Third of all, no guns can be held unless I'm required to, in this case being the rocket launcher in 5.3. Fourth, I must get an S rank in kills on every stage I do. And finally, in-game progression has to be followed, meaning I'm not allowed to use Whiplash until after 4.4. No exceptions for any of these rules are necessary this time, with the minor exception of the rocket launcher in 5.3. One final note before getting into the levels is the fact that I'm going to be addressing some of the enemies differently in this video as opposed to last time. In this video, I will be referring to Malicious Faces as Maurice's and Cerberus as Andre's. If I wanted to, I could refer to them by proper name, but I just like calling them Maurice's and Andre's, so I'm going to do it. With that brief refresher done, it's time to put down our guns and get back into the challenge with fun. Feels good to be back into the swing of this, huh? In case you missed it in the last video, I actually recorded the footage and audio for it all the way back in November and December of 2022 or so. It feels good to be playing something that isn't P2 or the cyber grind for once. Starting off the level, there was this horde of filth and a couple street cleaners, one of which I shot off the edge and watched fall to its death. Following this, there were some more fodder enemies, just some strays and soldiers, which weren't really a problem. Past the start of this level was where I met what would be the true villain of this playthrough: Virtues. Virtues are one of the most annoying enemies in the entire game. They fly around, shoot an annoying beam of light down from the sky, and enrage after a few strikes, making their beams even harder to dodge. Here's a fun fact I bet you didn't know. You can actually parry Virtues. If you punch them with the feedbacker while they do this little purple aura thingy, it counts as a parry. In normal gameplay, this is pretty impractical since most people aren't really ever punching a Virtue, but in this challenge, it will end up being a lifesaver at multiple points. Following the introduction of Virtues, most of the stuff afterwards in the level wasn't very much of a challenge, just being fodder enemies that can be easily taken care of with the Knuckle Blaster and parrying. This room with the Virtue and 2 street cleaners was kinda crazy, but wasn't all that difficult. The final room of the level is kind of crazy, opening with 2 Virtues alongside a bunch of fodder enemies. After those guys are defeated, then 2 Andres spawn, who I have now learned are the bane of my existence in this challenge. They have a large pool of health and only one parryable attack, being the thrown apple. This means my only consistent way of bringing them down is spamming the Knuckle Blaster until they finally die. 4.2 would introduce me to a mechanic I would learn to hate in this challenge. Sanded enemies are already a somewhat difficult hurdle to overcome in regular gameplay, but in this challenge, it's a different beast entirely. Not being able to regain health through punching enemies is a deadly counter to one of my 2 ways to regain health. Unfortunately for me, the first enemy that is shown with this mechanic is the one which is most heavily affected by it in this challenge, being an Andre. I already aired my grievances about Andres in the section about 4.1, but this exemplifies the problem. When fighting a sanded Andre, the only way for me to heal is through parrying the thrown apple, which is a high-speed, small projectile with a very short parry window, meaning the best course of action when fighting a sanded Andre is to not get hit. Not really the most sustainable strategy, but oh well. This section with a Virtue and some sanded enemies was a little stressful since a Maurice also spawned and got me on low health before I was able to kill it. The section with 2 sanded Andres was kind of scary, but I never really ended up taking any damage, and both of them killing themselves at the same time helped me significantly. In the room where I need to get the blue skull, I ended up dying once because of poor play and being overwhelmed by the extreme amount of enemies. The Virtues were also somewhat annoying, but still manageable. As for the red skull, I actually ended up dying 3 separate times while trying to get it. I got too careless while fighting the Maurices and kept getting killed by some stray bullets or explosions while trying to focus one down. After I got my act together and started paying more attention to my surroundings, I was able to get the red skull with only minor complications. As for the fight against the Insurrectionist, it would have likely been considerably harder if I hadn't previously learned how to parry Insurrectionists for P2 and the cyber grind. This knowledge of how to fight well against Insurrectionists would serve me well later in P2. In all honesty, I was expecting 4.3 to be really hard. This is likely just because when I first started playing ULTRAKILL, 4-3 gave me a super tough time. Nothing noteworthy happened in the level until the room with the 4 torches you have to activate. This room was really scary for me as it was essentially just one long gauntlet of enemies that would require me to entirely restart the room if I died. I didn't have any particular order of waves I wanted to do the room in, just activating them essentially at random. The wave with the Virtue and the Street Cleaners was kind of scary, but once the Virtue went down, the Street Cleaners quickly followed suit. The final wave of enemies, consisting of a sanded Andre and a regular Andre, had an extremely close call, where at the end I was at low health and just the sanded Andre alive, and I was barely able to parry the apple to regain all my health and kill the Andre. Once again, nothing really noteworthy until the end of the level, which was another extremely stressful encounter. All the Virtues and sandy projectiles at the end led me to quite a few close calls and desperate plays. I nearly died multiple times trying to ground slam into the Virtues for some reason, resulting in me falling into the pit and losing like 50 health. I am so lucky that the smaller fodder enemies essentially functioned as little packets of health, otherwise I would have been completely screwed several times over. Looks like someone came back to get beat up again. Much like the first time around, B2 isn't much of a challenge, and hasn't seemed to learn that his shotgun and pistol are actively detrimental to his health. Look at this idiot, continuing to shoot me with his pistol and shotgun only to get his pellets punched right back at him at Mach 50. That being said, I did end up dying to him once, though that was mostly the fault of myself for playing like an idiot and not reading B2's attacks correctly. This level played pretty much identically to 1-4, save for the fact that I now do account for V2 using coins and a nail gun against me. After sufficiently beating the crap out of V2 for the second time, he slipped on the pyramid and exploded into a pile of blood. Out of this blood, I got... Finally. Whiplash is immensely useful for pretty much everything, as it will allow me to bring smaller enemies to myself as well as bringing myself to larger enemies quicker. And I'm sorry to the person who commented on the first part saying they were happy I didn't use the Whiplash at all. You might want to close the video and shut your eyes, because you're not going to like how much I use it for the rest of this. Anyways, after getting Whiplash, I finished off 4-4. I wasn't happy with the fact that I only got an A rank, so I went back, beat the crap out of V2 even harder, and got a P rank. Wrath. Up there is one of my favorite layers in the game. Nice change of scenery from the harsh, bright yellows of greed. As far as stuff to comment on, I don't really have much to say about the start of the level, aside from Whiplash making Virtues ridiculously easy to kill compared to beforehand. Grappling to Virtues and Maurices from across the map makes killing them much easier. The third blue skull I took in the level was the one in the room containing the Mind Flayer, which I expected to be pretty difficult since Mind Flayers are often one of the more dangerous enemies to encounter in this challenge. In some strange series of events that I don't fully understand, when I killed the Virtue, the Mind Flayer just sort of died instantly. I think what happened was it shot out the barrage of projectiles right as the Virtue died, and when the Virtue's core exploded, it shot the projectiles back at the Mind Flayer, killing it instantly. But hey, I'm not complaining about a free Mind Flayer kill. After the skulls are collected is where another new enemy gets introduced, being the Sentry. If I were to have made this video, say, 2 years ago instead of right now, Sentries would be something of a nightmare to kill, since if memory serves me right, the Knuckle Blaster used to not be able to get them out of the ground. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not 100% sure about that. Thankfully though, I'm doing this now and not then, which means Sentries aren't really a big deal since I can just unjam them from the ground and then beat them up immediately afterwards. And even if I don't decide to do this, I can just wait until they're ready to fire their laser and then punch them for an easy parry. This doesn't really relate to the challenge, but 5-2 is like my second or third favorite level in the game, behind 6-1 and 7-3. I really like the atmosphere it has with the pouring rain and water beneath the whole stage. There isn't really anything notable that goes on during the start of the level, though I had a bit of a close call here with the section with the Stalker. Also, this happened. I died once here after I tried to ground slam onto this Virtue, only to fall straight into the water and get blasted by the Maurice right after teleporting back up. The indoor part following this is the point where I'm introduced to idols, something that makes the room that follows this part really difficult. This room starts out easy enough, but once the second wave of enemies spawns, it gets really difficult. 2 Andres and an invincible virtue is evil. I don't know if this is just a me thing, but enraged virtues are like one of the hardest things in the entire game to dodge. I just can't ever adjust to the predictive placement of the big laser. Thankfully, I first tried this room, granted there were quite a few close calls. This closed-in room is kind of hard with another invincible virtue with like 3 street cleaners and a sentry guarding it after you break the idol. Once the street cleaners are dealt with though, it's not very hard. Ending off the level is a fight against a ferryman, and I think it's best if my friend explains how you deal with them. So how would you say you deal with the ferryman?
You gotta ferryman the ferryman.
I hate this guy. I died to this fight a couple of times since I had to de-rust my parry techniques against ferrymen, as it's been several months since I last played ULTRAKILL. Though, overall, the battle isn't very hard. Trust me when I say, this training will come in handy later. Honestly, I thought this level was going to be a lot harder. Something notable I learned at the start of this level is a really good way to instantly kill street cleaners. If I'm able to whiplash a street cleaner into the air, I can hit their back with the Knuckle Blaster and instantly kill them, which helps me save some time and is less risky than running at them into their fire with the Knuckle Blaster. I went for the Red Skull first, which I was expecting to be somewhat difficult because of the Mind Flayer spawning with the sentry, but I was actually able to take them down without any hassle. This is also the point where I remembered that the Knuckle Blaster's shockwave is a really good way for completely denying a Mind Flayer's projectiles from coming within a 500 light year radius of myself. Now, before I start seeing people say that I'm able to insta-kill the Mind Flayers by timing the Knuckle Blaster shockwave just right, I know. I've just been way too lazy to learn the timing to do that, and I just instead choose to not do that because I find it more consistent. And so please stop reminding me. I know how to do that. Once again, as the rules of the challenge say, I have to get both skulls on the level in order to get an S rank in kills, meaning I have to go back and get the blue skull as well. Honestly, the blue skull was harder than the red skull for this, with the first room having 2 Andres and a Maurice to kill, before pitting me against a Virtue and 2 sentries. The fodder enemies helped make that part a little harder as well, bringing me to low health briefly. This room with the idol and the Virtue and the big staircase was pretty easy and allowed me to test my street cleaner insta-kill tech again. The really big room where you normally get double guns was a serious test of endurance in what I had learned so far, throwing like a bajillion fodder enemies at me alongside some sentries and a Maurice. After this wave of enemies, I was hit with a Mind Flayer and 2 Virtues at once. I nearly died at this point, barely being able to regain my health by running around like a madman. 2 Andres also spawned at some point, complicating things further. Thankfully, once the Virtues were taken care of, the rest of the enemies fell pretty easily. I'm not entirely sure if you need to pick up the rocket launcher to complete this level, but I picked it up anyways. The rest of the level went pretty smoothly without any large chaotic groups of enemies such as the one just described. The close quarters encounter with the 2 street cleaners would have been somewhat difficult had I not discovered the street cleaner insta-kill technique earlier in the level, allowing me to close it out without any significant struggles. Five 4 was really easy. This level is just like always easy. Be it with guns or without, this level really just never poses much of a challenge. The main reason this level is so easy is the fact that you can just grapple onto the Leviathan and punch it while sitting on top of it, as well as being able to parry back to projectile bursts it sends at you. One projectile parried back at it wouldn't do much damage if it wasn't for the fact that when it explodes, the other projectiles the Leviathan launches also explode into it, causing a bunch of friendly fire explosion damage to hit it. I don't think I ended up dying at all, but the level did end up taking me a little bit to complete due to me being kind of sloppy with the parries. Also, fun ULTRAKILL fact number 2.
It's not ULTRAKILL, but it's not fun to actually use.
No, but it's no, it's a fun. It's fun and it's an ULTRAKILL fact. So it's a fun. No, no.
Parrying the Leviathan would not only be necessary, but also recommended.
No, but it's
not a
no, you're wrong. Shut up.
What the heck?
It's a fun ULTRAKILL fact.
Oh, he's writing with the YouTube script right now. We're getting ready to play Lethal Company.
No, but Dargo, think about it. It's an ULTRAKILL fact that is fun. So it is a fun.
Wait. So you like parrying the Leviathan?
Can you put a random PSA?
Yes.
Like,
Do you think
oh
parrying the
my
Leviathan is fun? Do you think parrying the Leviathan?
You can actually parry the Leviathan's seemingly unparryable attack. Even though it flashes blue, it's still an attack that can be parried. I think the reason for this was like, the attack originally had a yellow parry flash, but Hakita decided it was too difficult so he changed it to be blue, but still left the ability to parry it in the game. And when I say hard, I mean like, it's really, really hard. This clip literally took me over 17 minutes to get that one parry. Time for the second best level in the game. As far as levels in the game go, at the time of writing the script, which was November 25th of last year, 6-1 was my favorite level in ULTRAKILL. Honestly, I severely overestimated how hard this level was going to be. Granted, I did die twice in this room near the beginning with the swords machine and all the fodder enemies because I was trying to mess around and do something. I don't quite recall what I was trying to do, but evidently it did not go well. I died once in the room with the two virtues, Maurice and Sentry, because I wasn't sure how to approach it and just kind of walked into an enraged virtue beam. The big outdoor area was pretty easy since most of the difficult enemies could be hidden from behind walls or ran away from. I hit this sick double parry on a Sentry and swords machine at the same time right here, and then immediately after, this poor virtue got friendly fired to oblivion by all the strays and soldiers around it. I flung a Sentry off the map and blew up a bunch of enemies by parrying this Maurice. In the next outdoor section, a street cleaner just kind of walked off by itself before I went and bullied this virtue. This part was a little scary for a moment before I was able to shake off the hard damage I had accumulated and parry a projectile to get all my health back. After that part, Gabriel started yapping at me about how he can smell my bloodstained hands or whatever. Who really cares what he has to say? Now for the room I was fearing the whole time. 2 hideous masses at once. And let me tell you how shocked I was when I saw that one single hit from the Knuckle Blaster did this much damage. I also only just now learned that you can actually remove a hideous mass's tail harpoon with the feedbacker and not just the Knuckle Blaster. Once the first hideous mass fell, the other came down really easily. The Knuckle Blaster just shredded their health and was the real MVP of this level. Once both hideous masses died, it was just some Andres and a swords machine to deal with. Easy stuff that I've fought a ton before. It's funny, 3 deaths in the level and literally none of them came from the room I was so fearful of.
Machine, I will cut you down, break you apart, splay the gore of your profane form across the stars. I will grind you down until the very sparks cry for mercy. My hands shall relish, ending you here and now.
Poor Gabriel really can't catch a break, can he? He's just as easy as he was in Act 1, with the only difficulty difference being his tendency to teleport behind me once he enters Phase 2. All of his attacks are ridiculously easy to parry with super predictable patterns, even when he does end up teleporting behind me, which just leads to a minute-long bullying session against Mr. Apostate of Hate over here. To top it all off, I finished the fight off with a super disrespectful punch from the feedbacker while he was at like 1 HP. If what you say about us meeting again is true, Gabriel, please put up more of a fight in Act 3. Alright, so here's the part where I eat my words, isn't it? If you think back to the Act 1 video, I rambled for like a minute or two about how P2 was probably going to be like really, really hard and how I didn't think I was going to be able to do it. Well, yeah, P2 was honestly really easy. Okay, maybe not really easy, but like a whole lot easier than I was expecting it to be. The fact that this took me only 1/3 of the time P1 took me was a complete shock. I think the best way to break down this level is room by room, since there's so much to talk about here, so what better way to start than with the first room? I'm being so serious when I say that this was the hardest room in the entire level for this challenge. You'd think it would be like the double mind flayer room, or the big room at the end, or even the tunnel, if you're stupid, but no. The first room of the entire level was the biggest roadblock. Out of the 9 deaths that I had in this level, the first room accounted for 2/3 of them. 6 out of the 9 deaths in my time playing this level came from the first room. The reason behind this is just how awfully cramped it is, as well as being paired with some of the worst enemies possible for the challenge. Starting off with 4 Andres is brutal, with Knuckle Blaster spam and self-damage from the Andres being the only way I could possibly take them down. Once they died in the ferryman spawn, things only got worse, with the virtues that spawn outside of the room not making things any easier. The fact that most of the time they ended up enraging, which made dodging around and parrying the ferryman even harder, didn't help with clearing the room either. Once I finally passed the room, it felt so great to get to beat the crap out of the two virtues that had been giving me so much trouble. The section after it was easy, with some fodder enemies alongside a swords machine and a sentry. The invincible mind flare wasn't too big of an issue here, as the area was small enough for her projectiles to be largely ignored. The small tunnel here is also very easy, just containing an Andre and a street cleaner, both of which can be easily dealt with. Now for the room I was expecting to give me the most trouble, that actually wasn't so bad. The most infamous room of P2, the double mind flare room. While I did die here twice, it honestly wasn't too bad. Maybe I was just really locked in by that point, or I could have just gotten lucky, but regardless, it was actually relatively easy. It's never the first wave of enemies in this room that gives me trouble. The swords machines and sentry aren't that big of problems. It's the non-stop chaos caused by the virtues and Maurices that spawn afterwards that are my biggest downfall. I can never handle the insane amount of projectiles coming my way alongside the blasts from the virtues. Once I passed this room, I ended up dying once in the room against the two insurrectionists before remembering a strat I once saw where you can bait one of them into spawning over the instant death water stuff, making it a 1v1 rather than a 1v2. After this was a tunnel, and I want to take a brief moment to mock my friend Darkloaf. Over and over we argue about whether or not the tunnel is actually difficult, with him stating it is the hardest room in the entirety of P2. I stand here today in front of however many people end up watching this video to say that no, Darkloaf, not only is this not the hardest room in P2, it is in fact super easy. So easy, in fact, that I first tried it without using any guns. Beat that. So now back to our regularly scheduled mauling from this level. The tunnel wasn't actually that bad. I had a couple close calls with the Maurices in the first room and the Andres in the second room, but it wasn't very hard. My strategy for the first room consisted of knuckle blasting the virtues into the wall in order to instantly kill them before focusing down the sentry and Maurices. In the room that followed, I knuckle blasted the two sentries into the ground before killing the Maurice and nearly dying to the Andres. Thankfully, I was able to kill the two Andres with relative ease, just running around and punching them with the knuckle blaster a bunch. Now for the next room, I was expecting to be a bit of a roadblock. The big room at the end is one that I hear a lot of people complain about usually, even when you're allowed to use guns, and honestly, I don't really get it. But we aren't here to use guns. No. I'm here to use no guns. Remember the part from earlier where I talked about how I have to parryman the ferryman? Here's the part where that is most essential. Now, I know other enemies spawn alongside the ferryman, but to be honest, I just kind of ignored them and hard-focused the ferryman. That was my biggest priority to kill, and it just ended up team killing the swords machines anyways. Once that was out of the way, it was time for the part I was most scared of. The 4 sentries spawning at once was a scary thought, since my goal was to cycle between the 4 of them at once in order to keep myself from getting shot. This strategy didn't really work and required me to dodge around much more than I would have liked. Thankfully, I've done this room a lot, so dodging the sentries wasn't a huge issue, it just required a lot of spatial awareness. I didn't actually realize until watching back the footage just how close I was to dying for so much of this room. I was on 50 health for quite a while dodging sentry attacks, which do 50 damage. If I'd slipped up, that would have been bad, but thankfully, I was locked in, so that didn't happen. After killing the sentries, the wave of enemies after wasn't too bad at first, until all the virtues were dead. Once all that remained were 3 sanded Andres and a sanded hideous mass, I was terrified. I was on 50 health with no feasible means of healing. The way I ended up dealing with them was just running around in circles until the Andres inflicted enough self-damage to kill themselves through the apple explosions, leaving just the hideous mass and myself. That wasn't much easier though, as I was still at 10 health dealing with a sanded hideous mass. I just kept running around and dashing through it until I ended up finally killing it after several minutes. Now for the man I've been waiting to fight this whole time.
A visitor. Indeed, I have slept long enough.
Thankfully this time around I didn't have to fight this battle's version of the flesh prison, since just running away from the Panopticon and waiting is enough for Sisyphus to break out himself. As for the fight against Sisyphus, it's honestly a bit hard. Granted, I didn't die, but I certainly got close once or twice, and I was only able to heal back with well-timed parries. While Minos is still my favorite boss in the game, Sisyphus is far and away the most fun in my opinion. There's so much going on that it's so daunting at first, but over time, once you can learn how to effectively combat his attacks, Sisyphus becomes a much more fair fight. To me, he feels like Minos if Minos was more difficult, which I definitely love. Almost all of his attacks having a parry window of some kind makes the fight very doable in this challenge, even if it's still relatively difficult. I really like how in Phase 2 his attacks get much more rapid fire and hard to keep up with, despite still being very possible to keep the situation under control. It requires concentration and lots of learning to get super consistent at the fight, especially in Phase 2, but it is so rewarding. Once again, like I said in the last video for V2, try this fight out gunless. It's extremely fun. Also, thank you so much to Hito for making it so you can parry his attacks in Phase 2. I remember when P2 first released and you couldn't parry any of his attacks in Phase 2, and it made the fight really, really inconsistent and unfun. Was Act 2 harder than Act 1? Yes, it absolutely was. Was it as hard as I thought it was going to be? Definitely not, especially in P2. I apologize if it seems like I rambled a little too much about P2, but I just had a lot to say about that level. I'm very glad that it wasn't as hard as I was expecting it to be, as I would never ever wish another P1 gunless upon someone, because that was hell. Try this challenge out if you want. It's quite a bit of fun, say for P1, and I'm... Oh. Okay, it says here in the script, I am very excited for the release of Layer 7. So, yeah, I wrote this in November. I am currently recording it on May 30th, 2024, 12:16 a.m. But we can ignore that. We can ignore that. Hey, we can ignore that. I'm not going to do Layer 7. I'm going to wait for the rest of Act 3 to come out before I do that, because I just want to do that as a whole thing. Also, I'm not doing Act 3 on Brutal. I'm not doing any of this on Brutal. I would actually want to die if I did this on Brutal. I'm not doing it on Brutal. Also, I'm going to wait until P3 comes out before I do Act 3 as well, because I want to do that whole thing as one. So that is not coming out for a very, very long time, to say the least. That's about everything I have to say for this challenge. If you'd like to see me do any other ULTRAKILL challenges, let me know. I'd also do stuff about other games. I currently have a video explaining the combat of a game called Library of Ruina in the works. I am also very happy with the support the first video got. That one got... oh my god, I'm checking on it for the first time in like 2 months. It's at 29,000? I know this one's not gonna do nearly as well. I'm just floored by the support the first one got. 29,000. That's so much. That's a lot. That's a lot. I'm kind of rambling right now. Yeah, that's really... I don't really have anything else important to contribute to this. Thank you for listening to me talk about my experience with an ULTRAKILL challenge. For all I know, you'll be seeing the next video here in December 2025. I don't know. I procrastinate a lot. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.